we have Shehu Sani, a former Nigerian lawmaker, and also joining us later on will be Remi Sonaiya, a former presidential candidate for Kowa party. Thank you so much for your time today, sir, Mr. Sani. And let's get into the topic of the type of president Nigeria needs for now.
Thank you for having me in your program. Well, first of all, as a nation of about 211 million people, we are facing serious challenges on infrastructure, challenges on security, on education, on health, on national unity, and on issues that has to do with the existence of the country itself when it comes to the issue of the call for restructuring. Now, ideally, means in an ideal situation, the president Nigeria needs is the one with a vision, with a focus, with the experience and the knowledge of our problems and his competence to address those issues. That is in an ideal situation. Because as the country is now, we need a leader that will unify the country. Because over the years, we have never been so divided as we are today. It is still about Muslim, Christians, it is still about North, South, it is still about other issues that borders on identity. So we need a president that will unite us as a people and as a nation. That's very important. Secondly, over the years, in the last 1 decade, Nigeria has been facing a serious security problem. And this has transcended this government. It has been from the PDP and up to the APC. And all the promises made by the present administration has not been met in terms of addressing the problems of security. Security means the terrorism we face in the northeastern part of the country, the banditry in the northwestern part of the country, the kidnapping that is all over in all parts of the country, the separatist agitation and hoodlum activities in the southeastern part of Nigeria. We need a president that will frontally address these security challenges. This is what we need. Secondly, and thirdly, the issue of infrastructure. This is a country that is an oil exporting nation with a very strong potential in agriculture and other solid minerals and the manufacturing. So we need someone with a knowledge of the economy and how he can harness the resources of our country for the development of our country. This is the president we need. And now, what is on the ground now is that people do not think of the president or do not elect president based on his capacity, ability, and knowledge to address issues. First of all, they look at the calling of their religion, the calling of their sectional identity, the calling of their ethnicity, and then from there, all other things come secondary. And if that has been the case, and it is still not very far from where we are today. And if we are going to use those parameters to elect our president, the problems will actually not be solved. So the president we need to elect as a country is the one that will address our issues. And I believe once we have a president that will use his the opportunity of office and has the boldness and the courage to address these issues, I believe Nigeria will be at a better place than it is now. But for me, I think this election is another opportunity. It is not like all other elections in the sense that at least for the president has been able to tackle the use of money for votes. We can see what happened in last primaries. Good people have been shut out of the way because they don't have money to pay delegates and for them to vote for them. The major political parties, including the one I am a member, hundreds of millions of dollars were used to give to delegates to elect leaders from those National Assembly, governorship, the presidential. So, but for now, I believe the policy that has been introduced at late has caused a lot of hardship for our people. Our people are suffering. They couldn't buy, they couldn't sell, they couldn't do any business. But at least for once, there is no enough money to share to electorates for them to vote. The criminalization of our democratic system begins with that very idea of sharing money. People are being bought over, and there is no difference between slave trade and people buying vote. One of the reasons why leaders don't feel accountable to their people in Nigeria simply has to do with the fact that if you want to contest election, all you need is not people, it's money. If you have money, you can share to people. People will elect you into office. And then when you are there, you spend your 4 years doing what you like on the ground that by the time the election reaches, you will still share money and win. But time like this, I have gone around many world, especially from the northwestern part of Nigeria today. And those who are expecting money, they couldn't get money. At least some of them resorted to sharing food items to people, but it has not been, the message has still not been able to reach. So people have been able to vote freely. They move to their polling booth, vote, and go back home, hungry, even without water to drink. That's how it's supposed to be. So I think we are about getting it right. And if people can elect leaders based on their conviction, based on their beliefs in them, based on the fact that they believe that those leaders can address those issues, I believe that we are on the right path. We will now begin to see leaders emerging through credible process, leaders emerging through honest process, and the people are being voted not because they come from bigger parties, but because they have something to deliver to the people. Now, this is my own little contribution on it.
Thank you, Mr. Sani. And if I can move on to Mrs. Shonaya, who is a former presidential candidate, the point that Senator Sani has pointed out, you can say it runs through the history of Nigeria's politics. You can describe it as money politics. And I guess it begs the question, from your experience, obviously contesting an election, what's your perspective on this thorny issue? And do you think that, just as he eloquently described the type of leader Nigeria needs, that Nigeria can still find that quality of leader that can emerge from this political process as it currently runs now?
First of all, thank you very much. And I would like to congratulate Nigerians on this very important moment in our history as a country. Everybody has characterized today's election as a most important one for the country. And we all really pray and hope that we will get it right. Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, Nigerians have had a very bad experience, I believe, with electing our leaders, associating the electing of leaders with money. It is so linked together, so connected in the minds of many people. Because I do remember that when I ran for office, people asked me up front, so what have you brought for us? Think him and merely talk, and we would believe you and vote for you. But one thing that has happened with election is that we're beginning to see a departure from that. You know, there's this expression that has come in with the contest of Peter Obi. We say he doesn't give shishi. You know, that means he's not going to give anybody money. So a dimension has been introduced into our elections with the current one, that it is possible to have candidates who are not going to give, and people with these elections, people willing to give rather than receive, people volunteering, donating their houses, part of their houses as, offices and for shops and things. So I believe that a change has happened in Nigerian politics. Unfortunately, all the disturbances that maybe we can view them as the, how would I call it, desperate acts of desperation on the parts of those who are sensing that things are changing, that the way they have known the elections to be conducted is no longer going to continue. And, so they're fighting back. But there's no doubt that Nigeria has turned the corner and that we are going to head in a different direction.
Do you agree, or are you cautiously optimistic?
I agree with, the general tenor of the conversation from both Shehu Sani and Mrs. Sonaiya. What I wanted to introduce is the fact that there's been, you see, this monetization of Nigerian politics has corresponded with the increasing poverty rate and the decline in social indices and living standards of the people. So there's a correlation. So what is it? Because I remember two important elections, particularly in my state. In 1979 to 83, MKO Abiola, when he was still in the MPN, deployed a lot of money. That was my state. My relatives, my parents, my grandfathers were all involved in politics. He never won. His wife lost elections, lost his deposit. And then even as recently as 1999, people deployed money, and it was almost predictable in Yoruba land, for instance, that the person who tried to win the election spending money was likely to lose. But suddenly that changed as our people got poorer and as our values as people got worse. So we have to understand the connection with economic policy, with poverty reduction, with empowering our people, and therefore that is what we have to fight for. Increased literacy, increased quality of education, increased job opportunities, increased reduction of poverty, and then hope that as people are more comfortable, they have jobs, they have livelihoods, then they may not take 5,000 naira to vote for somebody. I see the seeds of that happening, but I think I won't agree with turned the corner. I think that the process has started, and that hopefully if we sustain this direction, and then maybe we can get back to principle-based elections.
All right, still a work in progress here, but I'd like to bring up the issue about the leadership style. In Nigeria, we talk about the body language of the president, and we've seen how that affects everything and how things run here. Let me bring in Mr. Shehu Sani here to speak on this. In looking at our next president, what type of leadership style are we looking at in terms of body language and even accessibility? Because that's also part of the style of the president.
Beg your pardon?
Yes, the type of leadership style we can expect, Nigerians should want from the next president. We've just come through a period with the current president who hasn't been so accessible and who has a certain body language in how he addresses people. And in looking at our next president, what should we aspire for?
Well, taking cognizance of the complexity of Nigerian nation and its politics and what has happened of recent, whoever is going to emerge as a president of Nigeria, he has a Herculean task ahead of him. But there are certain things which he is supposed to do of immediate. And one is unifying the country. And unifying the country is not simply by statement, but by running an all-inclusive government. In the past, the idea was that once people don't vote for you, so they should be marginalized or alienated out of governance. But you need to have a country first. You need to have that peace in the country for you to be able to preside over the affairs of the nation. And the only way for you to have that peace is to making sure that every person have a sense of belonging. Every person is a shareholder in that country, in that government, and in the way you run your government. So he must extend the hands of friendship to those who are defeated, and also bring them on board. The whole thing, the way government is run in Nigeria is such a way that when people find themselves in the position of power, they don't recall that they were elected into office. It's as if they behave as if they have waged a war and has conquered, and as such, the booty that came as a result of that conquer should be shared by the victor and his own cronies around. This is what happens in Nigeria in the last few years. So for now, getting on board even the opposition and those who didn't vote for you, I think will help. Secondly is that those who will constitute the cabinet of the next president should be people of competence. If people have worked for you to be president of Nigeria and then you have to compensate them, don't compensate them with appointment that will determine the life of 200 million people. If someone is competent to occupy a position, you can give him. But it does not mean because someone has worked for you and he is not competent to hold any position of authority, and then you use that position of authority to compensate him, like the way the President Buhari has done. He has appointed ministers and they have been in office for 8 years as if he doesn't know anybody in the country. Minister of this 8 years, minister of that 8 years, minister of the other. And it even reached a point where people holding positions in ministries, departments, and agencies, they even have their tenures been extended, either as Controller Generals of Immigration, of Prisons, of Civil Defense. They have their tenures extended, now destroying the career of those behind them who are supposed to take over. So whoever is going to take over now, make sure that merit should be the watchwords, the guiding principle of people who's going to appoint in office. The next thing is that there should be priority of what needs to be tackled first. Immediate issues, which is the economy and security. You have to address the problem of the economy here. If you address it, and then we will now, and to address the problem of economy, it's not simply about appointing Minister of Budget and National Planning or Minister of Finance. It's having a very strong economic team of experts drawn from the private sector, from the academia, from the public sector, people who have something to deliver, who have result. The diaspora, you have to bring them back. People are excelling out of this country, and they are not being invited to come back simply because maybe they were not active in the campaign, or they virtually are not part of the inner cycle. If you want to succeed, you sometimes have to offend even the people who helped you to be there. President Buhari realized this too late. For 8 years, this was a man who came to power by popular vote against the People's Democratic Party. And once he took that office, he found himself back to the hands of those who were supposed to have been excised out of his government. Until the last minute, he now left this issue of election to be his last legacy. And you can see how they now rose up to fight him. He's supposed to start this fight 4 years ago. Immediately he won his second term. He's supposed to cut off from that parasitic, rent-sinking political elites that have always been in government purposely for their own purpose. So someone who is going to take over power in Nigeria has to know that he was elected by Nigerian people, and he is there to serve Nigerian people, and he should serve them in such a way that he will advance their lives, advance the country. So the last thing, or the most other thing that is of immediate importance to the next president of this country, is to address the fundamental issue of Nigeria, the issue of the restructuring. What do we, how do we want to live as a country? How can we, if you have a building and it has structural default, you know that you are sitting on a cake of gunpowder. So there are reports upon reports by constitutional conference, political reform conference that have all been there lying in the dust in the presidential villa. We have to bring them out, extract them, look at those that can be implemented by the president and that need the accent of National Assembly. Let's do them. Let's make sure that things work at this time. Let's ensure that the president who is going to come next should put in Nigeria first, the nation first, for the betterment of the country. This is a country of 211 million people that has a very big potential in Africa and the world. But we are sleeping. How can terrorists that are less than 10 to 15,000 in a country become such a force, holding over 200 million people hostage? That needs to be done. So these are my own little ideas as far as...
Thank you so much for that your contribution in the show. Definitely quite a lot to ponder on there. That was Shehu Sani, a former Nigerian lawmaker. We also spoke to Remi Sonaiya, a former presidential candidate of Kowa Party.